Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show In Focus, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues as well. Today we're going to talk about National Credit Framework. Now, University Grants Commission, that is UGC, on Monday released National Credit Framework, which will allow students to earn credits for education and learning in all subjects, at all levels and in all mediums, including online, digital and the blended learning mode as well. Now, students will also receive credit for their experience in various aspects of the Indian knowledge system, such as Puranas, the Vedas, and other related components. The National Credit Framework, that is NCrF, has been jointly developed by UGC, AICTE, NCVET, NIOS, CBSE, NCERT, DGT, Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Skill Development to achieve the vision and intent of National Education Policy, that is NEP. Now, NCrF provides for assignment, accumulation, storage, transfer and redemption of credits. It paves the way for multidisciplinary education and empowers students through flexibility in choice of courses for choosing their own learning trajectories and programs. The NCrF divides the learning ecosystem into 8 levels, assigning credits based on learning hours from class 5 up to PhD level. It includes 18 broad theoretical disciplines and 64 applied sciences or vocational disciplines and crafts which can be considered for credit accumulation. So what exactly is NCrF? And NCrF also evaluates out of classroom learning, including sports and games, yoga, physical activities, performing arts, handicrafts and bagless stage. What will be the impact of bringing in NCrF? How will it work actually in terms of transforming the education ecosystem which we are talking about? How does it integrate with the NEP, and what will change for the students and for the educational institutes as well when we are talking about the NCrF or the National Credit Framework? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts today. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Professor M. Jagdish Kumar is joining us, Chairman of the University Grants Commission. Welcome to our show, Professor Kumar. We are also joined by Dr. C.B. Sharma, Professor of Education, IGNOU, and Professor Nilima Gupta, Vice Chancellor of Dr. Harsingh Gaur Vishwavidyalaya in Sagar, Madhya Pradesh, is also with us. Welcome to both of you as well. Let me begin with you, Professor Kumar, and let's start by understanding a bit more about the National Credit Framework, since UGC is one of the main agencies which has been involved with its development. If you could take us through why is first, as in why National Credit Framework is required, and then we can perhaps go into the contours of NCrF.
Sure. So the National Credit Framework is a meta framework. It is an enabling framework. If you consider it as the foundation, on this foundation of National Credit Framework, we have 3 verticals: the National School Education Qualification Framework, the National Higher Education Qualification Framework, and the National Skills Qualification Framework. Now, why do we want to have this enabling a meta framework? This is because NEP 2020 emphasizes a seamless integration of general academic education with the vocational and skill education.
Okay.
And that can be done only if there is a kind of structure in which there is equivalence between the learning that the student acquires. And that's why here there are 2 important concepts that we need to keep in our mind. One is credit and the other one is the level. So credit is the recognition of the prior learning for a given qualification at a given level. And then the number of notional learning hours for each credit is defined in this National Credit Framework. And as you said in the beginning, right from the school education to the higher education or the skill and vocational education, we have divided the learning into different levels. So I will explain as we discuss what are these different levels and how equivalence can be established for easy mobility of the students from, for example, general education to skill education, or from within the given stream of education, whether it is general education or vocational skill education, how vertical mobility can be facilitated, how horizontal mobility can be facilitated, and many of these things are part of the national credit framework.
Okay. Okay, Professor Kumar. In fact, we'll come to all those aspects which you're mentioning of various highlights or various aspects of the National Credit Framework. But let me first bring in Dr. C.B. Sharma here as well. Dr. Sharma, I remember this, conversation having with you on one of our shows about National Curriculum Framework, that is NCF. Now, the question which I want to ask you is that how does National Credit Framework gel with the NCF, that is the National Curriculum Framework, and also the larger aims and goals of the NEP, National Education Policy, as Professor Jagdish Kumar was also referring to?
Thank you very much. Look, the National Education Policy is a very forward-looking policy, and it brings in various issues about which we had been talking about in academia. The first and most important thing was that the school education and the higher education were completely cut off and there was no connect. The National Credit Framework brings the school education and the higher education on one platform. The credit assigned for learning hours has been defined, and that was the need of the hour to make the National Education Policy a reality. I only have a bit of problem that the National Curriculum Framework has come now, which has defined the school education as learning 8 subjects instead of 6 that the National Credit Framework talks of. So we will perhaps have to tweak the hours and the credit in terms of a school education, but then the credit framework brings the school education, vocational education, and the most important, learning, previous learning, RPL, recognition of prior learning. What the National Credit Framework says is, we have a lot of knowledge corpus in families which were not recognized, which the National Credit Framework recognizes now. So I believe this credit framework gels with the National Education Policy. Then what Professor Jagdish Kumar just now said, the National Curriculum Framework for the school, the National Higher Education Framework for the universities, and the vocational framework for the vocational education. There was hard division between the areas of knowledge which the National Education Policy tries to blur, and the National Credit Framework will do in a big way.
Okay. Professor Jagdish Kumar, coming back to you, sir, what are the levels which we are looking at, NCrF credit levels? Because as Dr. Sharma was referring to, there are different levels at school up to standard 5th, if we understand, and then standard 8th and up to standard 12th, and then in higher education as well. If you could, explain it to our viewers so that the levels are understood and their significance as well, why they've been classified in that way.
When the child enters the school education system, the child enters at level 0, but when the child passes out of the levels, then the child is exiting at level 4. So the child will reach level 1 when the child completes 5th standard, and then 6th, 7th, and 8th, the completion of 8th standard will correspond to level 2. And then 9th and 10th is level 3, 11th and 12th is level 4. And by the time the child completes level 4, the child will have acquired at least 160 credits. Of course, the child can gain more credits also depending on the interest and the capability of the student. And these credits will be stored in the Academic Bank of Credits platform that we have. And the higher education or the vocational and skill education, they start at level 4.5. For example, if a student has joined in BA Economics in first year, that is level 4.5, and each semester the student is required to gain at least a minimum of 20 credits. That means in a year where we have 2 semesters, the student should acquire through proper assessment 40 credits to move from level 4.5 to level 5.
Okay.
And this transition from one level to the other level is clearly by acquiring certain knowledge and skills, which we call as the learning outcomes. And the learning outcomes will keep changing as the student progresses from one lower level to the higher level.
Okay. Okay.
So when the student completes the third year BA economics, the student will reach level 5.5. Now, in most universities, already preparations are being done to introduce the 4-year undergraduate program. So to complete 4-year undergraduate program, the student has to exit at level 6. And then you have level 6.5, which corresponds to the master's degree. For those students who have done 3-year undergraduate program and then they want to do a 2 years master's program, then that is called level 6.5. And those students who have done 4-year undergraduate program, they can do a 1-year master's program, and that's also called level 6.5.
Okay.
But the engineering students who would have completed a 4-year undergraduate program, engineering program, if they complete the MTech program, then they would have exited at level 7, and then we move to PhD, which is level 8. So every year, the student is required to acquire at every level 40 credits.
Okay.
So at level 8, 40 into 8, the student would have acquired 320 credits by the time the student finishes the PhD.
Okay.
But
Now,
here,
one more question, Professor Kumar. Just to explain it a bit with a bit more clarity, those 40 credits at every level or 20 credits at every semester, which you're talking about, do they include the subjects which are being studied by the student only? Perhaps maybe somebody might be studying history or biology or literature or arts as well. What about credits which will be earned by the student in vocational courses or disciplines like sports, yoga, or Indian knowledge system as well? How will they be counted?
So these things are defined in our national higher education qualification framework, where there are skill-based courses. There are other kinds of courses which the students can take. And also because there is equivalence between vocational and skill education and the general education, a student can move between these two streams. For example, if a student has done ITI after 10th class, 2 years of ITI the student has done. And if they do one language course from the National Institute of Open School, then they will get a 12th standard certificate. And using that 12th standard certificate, although the student has not really done 11th and 12th standard, the student will still get a 12th standard certificate, and then they can go to the university and join in a stream of their interest if they are able to clear the corresponding entrance test. In this case, you have the CUET.
Okay. And if a student is learning yoga or through an online mode or a blended learning or perhaps some other vocational skill or from Indian knowledge systems or perhaps performing well in sports, any particular sports activity representing the state or district or the school or the college or university as well, will that also entail credits, and how will those be added? Just for the clarity of the students and the parents as well.
So absolutely. The beautiful aspect of the national credit framework is that it recognizes both the formal education, informal education, and also self-learning. For example, a person has spent several years in mastering, let's say, welding. And if that experience, that learning can be assessed through a proper assessing method, and credits can be given. And if those credits correspond to a set of credits which are required to gain admission in, let's say, in an undergraduate program, then the student will become eligible. But however, here, because the student might not have studied the certain courses which are prerequisites for the next level of courses, so in those cases, the university or college has to suggest to the students some bridge courses which the student can take either through SWAYAM or when the National Digital University comes through the National Digital University, the student can take these bridge courses and then continue to study like any other student. And the other important aspect is, let's say somebody has got a gold medal in Olympics or in Asian Games or at national level. So depending on their achievements in a particular domain of expertise, credits can be given through proper recognition of their achievements and their learning process in that particular domain. And if these credits correspond to a particular level, then the student can go to the next level in a university or college. But however, whether the student can be admitted or not in the next level, how the assessment will be done, what kind of credits will be given for this prior experience, expertise, is completely left to the corresponding regulators, whether it is UGC or AICTE or other regulators, and the universities which will admit these students. So the national framework provides only the general guidelines to us. The actual implementation part has to be done by the respective regulators and the university system.
Okay. Let me bring in Professor Neelima Gupta here as well. Professor Gupta, we would like to understand it from the higher education point of view, from the university point of view. You're the Vice Chancellor of, Dr. Hari Singh Gaur Vishwavidyalaya out there. How will this national credit framework change the way, the entire education system works right now at the higher education level? And what kind of changes will the universities like yours will have to bring in?
Well, I think this is right now a dynamic era, and we were waiting for this type of provision from the UGC whenever we were discussing it at the inter-university level. So with this framework which has now come in, and talking like your question about what do we expect from the higher educations or from the universities, I would say that now it is the proper time when we have these guidelines, and that has to be specified by each university. Like say, for example, till now, we used to think that school education and university education, they are entirely different. But now, as Professor Sharma also said, that they have come on a common platform. So coming on a common platform and talking about holistic type of education or multidisciplinary type of education, here we are trying to have an access. This policy talks about an access, about equity, about quality, about affordability, and about accountability. So when we talk about implementing this policy at the university level, like we have done in our university, we have framed a framework based on this policy. And now we have to fit in, like you were talking about incorporating yoga or sports activities. So on one hand, where we will be having a baseline course for our each program. On the other hand, these extra options which the student has, we can inculcate these, we can give these options to the students, like we have put them up on our website. And these students, they can opt for these courses and they can earn these credits. We have also, we will be also talking about, I think we cannot separate ABC out, that is Academic Bank of Credits, which we have implemented in our university also. And we have more than 4,000 registrations as on date. So where on one hand, we are earning credits. So these earning credits, like Professor Jagdish Kumar has already explained in detail, that how we are going to earn these credits right from the UG level up to the PhD level. And then these credits, it may be for the normal curricula, or it may be for those courses which are not a part of that particular program. They can be added on. And by adding these, then the further step will be storing these credits in the DigiLocker. And we can store them in the DigiLocker. And then the inter-university collaboration for earning these credits will also come into operation. That is, the credits earned from one university, they can be added on to the credits earned in another university. And so there will be, this is going to be an open platform or an open forum where now the student is free to choose, free to select any type of course which he or she desires.
Okay. Dr. Sharma, when we are talking about this integration, which you were earlier referring to, between the school education and the higher education as well, how will it, change the scenario? How will it work? Because, and also we would like to understand, what's the international best practice here? Because this kind of model is usually seen in some Western countries or European countries as well, wherein the school education is better integrated or properly integrated with the higher education.
Vishalji, you will have to look at the national credit framework in the light of the national education policy. See, the national education policy's vision is that we should have students or citizens who have various competencies and they can be self-employed. This dependence on degree for a job or a job after degree had to be removed. Now, start looking at it from the national education policy. What does it say? A child can study physics along with agriculture and dance. What you were asking, Professor Jagdish Kumar, was how would all these integrate? Look, we will have to define learning outcomes. I'm reminded 2017, we had come up with the learning outcomes for school education. What would a child learn after 1 year of studies? What would a child learn after 6 months of studying yoga? So we will have to define all the 64 areas of knowledge that we have in our culture, and now that will be integrated. So national education policy says include all areas of knowledge into your knowledge corpus. Yoga, agriculture, dance, including foreign languages. So start looking at it from there. The national education policy opens up. We had a very restricted, very tight curriculum framework before the national education policy came. Then came the national curriculum framework for school education. What does it say? It says you will have to study 8 subjects instead of the 6 that you previously had. And you will have to take at least 2 from 3 different disciplines. Like you cannot choose only science subjects or only humanities subject or only art subject or vocational subject. So you will have to select 2 from each of these. Now what will happen? A child decides to take mathematics, music, agriculture. So we will have to define after how many hours of study will a child acquire a competency that is expected of a 10th class pass or a 12th class pass.
Okay.
So now the National Council for Educational Research and Training, the NCERT, will have to define competencies of each of the areas of knowledge, and then the child will be able to take. What Professor Jagdish Kumar was saying, that in the lower stages, it will be 800 to 1000 hours, and from class 3 onwards, 5 onwards, it will be 1200 hours.
Okay.
So a child will take 800 hours of studies in the lower primary, class 1 and 2, and then 1000 hours in 3, 4, 5. Accordingly, the child will progress taking various subjects. Now you can see that once one has passed class 12, we'll have competencies in various areas of knowledge, and then one can decide which area one will go into higher education.
Okay.
You cannot look at the curriculum framework in isolation, and that is why the National Curriculum Framework says that the regulatory authorities, the bodies like the school boards or the what Jagdish Kumar said, National Council for Teacher Education, National Council for Architecture Education, they will decide how much will a child learn in one credit, that is 30 hours of study. A credit has been defined as 30 hours of study, but the council or the regulators can also redefine it, that flexibility, the national curriculum.
Okay, so it will have to be harmonious when we are talking about the implementation part. We will come to that as well, and we'll of course talk about this aspect of multidisciplinary education, flexibility as well, doing away with the straitjacket of education streams, bringing in more equivalence vis-a-vis the vocational education and the traditional education systems as well. But we'll take a short break here, and when we come back, we will continue all these discussions. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching In Focus, where today we're talking about the National Credit Framework. And in fact, after the break, we're also joined by one more expert here, Professor Vivekanand Natham from the Department of Political Science in Shamlal College, Delhi University, is also with us. Professor Natham, let me, bring you in on the discussion here. We're talking about the National Credit Framework, and the panelists have so far explained various aspects of it. What forms the National Credit Framework? What changes it will bring? From your point of view, when we are talking this integration between the school education and the higher education, how useful do you believe the National Credit Framework will be, and how complementary will it be to the NCF, the curriculum framework which we were talking about earlier, and of course the overall national education policy?
Thank you so much, sir. It's an important discussion, and I thank you very much for having me invited in this program. This National Credit Framework particularly, it sort of facilitates the credit giving process. Now we have unleashed the new educational policy, and we have come up with this academic credit bank, ACB, in which the credits earned by students are to be transferred in one way or the other. So the credit framework in particular facilitates that process. It clarifies and it makes it easier and understandable. That is one aspect. Another aspect is, as I think the previous speakers and previous analysts also have elaborated in details, that the watertight compartments that we had in the previous systems are done away with. Now here educational, the academic education, then vocational education, and also experiential learning, all these three things have been brought together, and therefore when we in the beginning we only had the credits, primarily the emphasis was laid on the academic learning. Not so much of importance was given to vocational learning and the experiential learning. That is something very important. Most importantly, now the Vidyas and Kalas that we have been talking about, and Indian knowledge system in particular, the lot of students have their expertise in various areas. But those expertise were not considered as part of their academics, and therefore they kept performing, but they scored poorly when it comes to the regular academic score. Now that is done away with. So since the vocational training and experiential training has also been incorporated into the mainstreaming of the credit process, I think that is very important, and that gives a way for students to explore and to manifest their inherent abilities and to be experts in the chosen areas. For example, the sports. Along with that, there are a lot of fine arts and then performing arts and various other aspects of arts. Now I teach graduate students. We offer a degree called Bachelor of Arts and then Master of Arts. But most importantly, we do not have much of arts in them. So now in real sense, the art is being incorporated, the art would be taken into consideration, and the platform is being provided. In this regard, this is an important development.
Okay, so flexibility there, taking into consideration the choice of the student, the areas or the discipline which the student wishes to pursue, and also the excellence in which in the fields where students is working on.
UGC under the leadership of Professor Jagdish Kumar has been collaborating widely on various other universities across the world. So this credit transfer thing would also be facilitated over a period of
international
time.
Aspect you're bringing in there. Let me bring in Professor Jagdish Kumar here only. Professor Kumar, taking you back to what Dr. C.B. Sharma was earlier referring to in terms of the regulatory mechanism and the implementation part here, the NCrF, the National Curriculum Framework, National Education Policy, all talk about a lot of, grand vision and aspects which need to be put in place, which are going to be really beneficial to the students in the long run. But how will it be implemented, the National Credit Framework specifically? Because that's the backbone of the curriculum framework as well as the NEP. And what kind of regulatory mechanism are we talking about here? Because this is a transition between the school education and the higher education as well. So there will have to be a very seamless movement of these credits and, of course, the entire policy mechanism also.
Right. When you look at NEP 2020, it's a vision document. but the actual operationalization of NEP 2020 was done by identifying 20 reforms from NEP 2020. Similarly, the National Credit Framework is a kind of roadmap that is given to us, to the regulators and the educational institutions, and we need to operationalize it. Now, one of the challenges that we had was the equivalence of credits. Earlier, every university had its own definition, and there were variations of how you define this credit. But now, in the National Credit Framework, we very clearly define what is the meaning of a credit. For example, we now define that each lecture hour, contact hour is equivalent to 1 credit. For example, if a student is taking a 3-credit lecture course, that means there will be 3 one-hour lectures in a week. And assuming that there are 15 weeks in a semester of 6 months, then there should be 45 lectures. And similarly, if there is a 2 hours contact, the student spends contact hours in the lab or in doing some practicals, then 2 hours are equivalent to 1 credit. So when we give these definitions, then across the country, once we adopt the definition of these credits, then it becomes very easy for the mobility of the students from one university to the other university, one college to the other college. So this is the operationalization part, the first step. The second step, of course, is that the national curriculum framework talks about the removal of the strict disciplinary boundaries. The students at the school level should not become specialists in a given subject. They need to learn multiple subjects so that they have a broader view of the world in which they are functioning. So the same philosophy is carried over in the university education. When we designed the 4-year undergraduate program, in the first year, the student will not specialize, but from second, third, and fourth year, the student can actually opt for a major and a minor, or even 2 majors, so that they can deeply study 2 different subjects. For example, if a student has taken BA Economics as a major, the student may like to do another minor or a major in computer science.
Okay.
Those kind of combinations had to be permitted now in the universities so that we encourage this kind of multidisciplinary education. And one more thing that I would like to add, currently what happens is in the university system, if a student has done commerce, then that student is eligible to apply only for BCom, only for an undergraduate program in a commerce subject. I think we need to come out of these strict disciplinary boundaries also. If a science student wants to do sociology in undergraduate program, or if a commerce student wants to do mathematics in an undergraduate program, we should allow the students, if they have demonstrated their competency by clearing an entrance exam such as CUET, we should permit them in this multidisciplinary subjects.
Okay.
Of course, they may require some bridge courses, they may require some special help to make up for the lack of certain learning that is required to do at a higher level.
Okay.
But universities have to come forward and help our students to take up this kind of multidisciplinary education. And all that is possible with the national curriculum framework and the national credit framework that is available to us across the country.
Okay, okay, and both being complementary to each other in terms of implementation as well. Dr. Sharma, I'd like to come to you, but let me first bring in, Professor Nilima here as well, because what Professor Jagdish Kumar was pointing out, the overarching, objectives and the way it has to be implemented. Let's also understand from somebody like Professor Nilima in terms of, its implementation part, the challenges therein, because several of the points which Professor Kumar was referring to will have to be implemented by universities like yours. So what are the challenges there? Are the universities equipped to bring in those changes? And if there is some kind of help required or some assistance required, on what grounds, where, which areas specifically?
Well, I think it's now the time to start working. Because with this excellent provision of the policy which has been given to us, it is now the duty of the universities to take it into their different bodies and to formalize it with respect to their university and with respect to their requirements. So I think that it is the proper time to define, like till now, if we talk, I think it will be better to understand this problem from the point of view of the students. So the students, when we talk about the national education policy, now one thing is very clear in their mind. They think that now we can opt for any type of course. I mean, if we are studying economics, like we can go in for some science subject or music or performing arts or sports, any such thing. So now they are tuned to that. But how they can opt for these courses, it's still not clear. Like in our university also, we are facing this problem that the students, they are still not clear about this concept. So first of all, we have to create some sort of awareness programs in our universities and make the concept clear. This framework, not only we should keep it to us, but we should share it with our students and let them know what are their options. Because I feel this concept is still not very clear to our students.
Okay.
So once we put it on the blackboard for them, and it is made clear that you can have, like we were talking, we can have one major subject, we can have one minor subject. And the students, on the other hand, they are very thrilled when they know that they have so many options to do. So I think we should now move ahead in this direction. All the universities, how to adopt this policy, how to provide a proper framework in which our courses have to be defined, our different bodies, our board of studies, academic council, they have to take it into their consideration. And I'm sure that most of the universities, they have adopted this policy in their, like we did when national education policy came, we started working right then.
Okay.
It's almost 3 years now. And how we can have a framework. We formulated our own framework, but we are happy that we got a framework from the UGC also.
Okay.
So this has made things very simple for us. And with this framework and the options which are available to our students, we have to start working on them. And when these things are clear, they know that which course we have to apply, which elective we can take, which major we can take, which minor we can take, because this is just the preliminary stage.
Okay.
They are not sure. So I'm sure that with this type of option, and then when we are moving ahead, not only we are talking about, say, for example, we are talking about, there are many options which are present here. It talks about blended learning. It talks about multidisciplinary teaching learning. It talks about training and skilling. It talks about vocalization or this type of education in which we are trying to develop a skill in them and experiential learning as well.
Okay.
So,
So
these options, they are now available for our students. And when they opt this, next step would be that we can also go into internationalization of education.
okay.
Like,
So a bit of hand-holding required as far as students are concerned out there. Dr. C.B. Sharma, I'd like to bring you in here, as well. When we are looking at these issues specifically, and as Professor Kumar was pointing out, in terms of the implementing part, and Professor Nilima was referring to the challenges therein. So how would you look at this? Is the implementing mechanism satisfactory? Do we need to further perhaps maybe tweak it as well? And how do we tackle some of these challenges? And that's a very important, significant point which Professor Nilima made, that students will have to be made aware. There will have to be a bit of a hand-holding to make them understand that this is the new ecosystem wherein they have to navigate in this particular way.
Vishalji, we will have to again start the discussion from the national education policy. What I would like to say is that the national education policy is not a document, it's a darshan. This is a darshan to change a nation. What Macaulay did in 1835, this document intends to do in the 21st century. And why am I saying this? Look, we had restricted our students to taking courses from a particular university. In the last few years, 7-8 years, universities have been signing MOUs with sister universities to provide more options. And to add to what Professor Jagdish Kumar said, that students can now take 40% of the credit from any other institution. So we are completely transforming the system of education in India. The universities were so restricted, so closed, they are opening up on the basis of the guidelines given by the national education policy. A student can take one course from IIT Bombay, one course from JNU one course from Bhagalpur University.
Okay.
And they will all add to the credits that one has earned. So now that the requirement of a particular university offering all the courses, all the programs is not required, and this the education policy was conscious of, and the credit framework is also conscious of.
Okay.
It says that the regulators will decide on it and they will give the guidelines.
Okay.
It is not a restrictive document. It's a very, very open and flexible document, which also Professor Jagdish Kumar said that the regulators will decide what will be a credit hour, say, for yoga, and how will it be different from a credit hour for learning physics. So the various credit hours for various disciplines will be defined by the regulators and the institutions.
And the equivalence will be brought in.
Students will be allowed to take courses from various institutions.
Okay. Let me bring in Professor Nartam here as well. Professor Nartam, when we are talking about the challenges in implementation, because any change in policy would mean that there will be certain challenges which we will have to deal with over a period of time. So, as Professor Nilima was pointing out, one, of course, is making students aware. Two, from the resources point of view as well. From the university's point of view, from the higher education institutes point of view, even from the school's point of view as well, there will have to be some changes made.
Yeah, obviously, as Professor Nilima ma'am also has quite elaborately narrated the entire difficulties that might the universities or the institutes or educational institutions might face, as this entire credit framework has been categorized at 8 levels, starting from the primary education till the PhD education. Therefore, now that the credit framework has been issued in the public, so there are certain mechanisms that certainly will be worked in consonance with the and in collaboration with the universities and the institutes concerned. For example, the outline has also stated that initially when a student would study in ITI, the 2 years program after 10th class, that would not be considered into academic education. Now, the credit framework has quite clearly stated that the 2 years of the vocational training would be considered into the regular studies, that academic studies, and for that they might get a certificate from NIOS, National Institute for Open Schooling. So, a language course that the student has to complete the language course. So, in this way the collaborations will work and the credit framework would also be clarified.
Okay.
And that would be useful for the students, I suppose. And most importantly, another factor that I was talking about was the flexibility factor. Now, since the initial courses were only theoretical studies, not much in tune with the realities of India. For example, I come from the tribal communities, tribal areas of Bharat, and also associated with tribal, the organization Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram. Previously also I had an opportunity to interact with you in one of your programs.
Indeed.
In perspective. So, the lot of the certificate courses and the diploma courses are being incorporated in the university setup. So, the flexibility, the factor, that flexibility that has been stated in the document National Education Policy and subsequently the clarification which is issued by the National Credit Framework would accommodate such courses. Therefore, the academic learning would not remain confined to only theoretical studies, but that those studies would be placed in the Indian realities.
Okay.
As it is famously said, our principal often says that taking classroom to the field and bringing the field back to the classroom, such a thing would be possible.
And that's what seemingly is one of the cornerstones of the NEP and the corresponding NCF and NCrF as well. Professor Jagdish Kumar, final question to you before we bring this discussion to an end, because these are big changes to the education system which we are looking forward to, and the NEP puts in place a vision for that. The NCF and NCrF, puts in the implementing agenda forward. Now, we have understood the how and why. What about the timeline? What kind of timeline are we looking at? Because this is not a small change at a particular level. This is a holistic change which we are looking forward to at all levels of education. So, what's the kind of timeline which we can look forward to, or perhaps, the planning for implementation?
Well, we have just come out with this national curriculum framework and also the national credit framework. Across the country, the academicians and the stakeholders, they are discussing and debating about it. Because our educational system is very diverse and very large, it will, of course, has to be implemented in stages. Those universities which have the requisite teachers and faculty and infrastructure, they will be in a position to implement in a faster pace. But then the others also have to pick up and then come up and implement this. But having said that, you see, earlier, if the whole purpose of this national credit framework and curriculum framework, there are two important objectives. One is to minimize these strict disciplinary boundaries, and two, to provide easy mobility for the students from discipline to discipline, or either vertically or horizontally.
Okay.
And in order to provide that, earlier, we didn't know how to do that because there was no equivalence of credit. Now, across the country, we will have identical credits in a given discipline. So that, therefore, if a student who has completed first year, let's say in Madras University, that student wants to join in second year in Kanpur University, it's very, very possible now for the students to migrate.
Okay.
So this is also we call multi-entry, multi-exit. The student may exit after 1 year, but take a break of 1 year, work somewhere, gain some experience, and then you join elsewhere, a lateral entry at second year.
Okay.
So when we discuss about multi-entry and multi-exit, some of the colleagues from the universities asked me, how can we admit if some 10 students apply, 100 students apply to my university, how can I admit them in the second year and third year? This is where you need to work out your own methodology for admitting such students. Let's say in first year, you have admitted in BA economics program 100 students, but by the time the second year comes, let's say 10 students have left, so you have 10 vacancies there. And if some 100 people have applied because your college is so popular and there are 10 vacancies in your second year level, some 100 people have applied, then you have to work out a methodology of admitting those students, maybe an entrance test, maybe an interview or a combination of these, and then fill up these vacant seats in the second year so that they will not go waste in the subsequent years.
Okay.
So this multi-entry and multi-exit can also be used to fill up any vacant seats that may arise in your own programs, and it can help the students to migrate easily from one discipline to other and from one institution to the other.
Okay.
And in terms of the timeline, well, it may take another 2-3 years for majority of the universities and colleges to start implementing it. But not later than 5 years, I think we should completely implement across the country the national credit framework so that we are in a position to take the national education policy forward.
Okay, fair enough. This looks like a well thought out plan for a huge change like this one. We're running very short of time, so we'll have to bring this discussion to an end here. Thank you so much, Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, Dr. C.B. Sharma, Professor Nilima, as well as Professor Natham for joining us and sharing your views and insight with us and our viewers on this very important aspect of the changes in the national education system, that is the national credit framework, which has been put in public domain by the UGC and has been prepared by other regulators along with UGC as well. This gives us a more clearer picture of how the vision of the national education policy, or the NEP, will be implemented in combination with the national curriculum framework. We'll keep on bringing you the details of changes in the educational system and the ecosystem here as well, and various other aspects also, various other topics. Keep watching Sansad Television. We'll be back again at 1 p.m. tomorrow in Focus.